So I'm realizing I did a whole bunch of stuff with the camera stopped. Didn't realize it wasn't rolling. So it's not like it was exciting stuff anyway, just painting a little bit and putting a few details on. But here's where we are now. I have applied the brake parts to the underframe as per the instructions. I'm not going to do anything with brake levers or brake pipes or anything like that. Again, this is a very basic car kit that has cardboard sides, so I want to build it as much to the instructions as I possibly can. So as if I was building it in 1940, using the same types of materials and everything. So with a embossed cardboard side, and then if I wanted to put like brake lines on it, then I'd say like, well, it needs this then, and it needs this other thing. And next thing I know, I don't have the original kit left. So I've gone through and I made some bolsters here that the trucks can mount on. I've drilled some holes. I put the trucks in. I realized that they're about at the perfect height, so that worked out quite well. The other thing I did was I shellacked the whole car. And the reason I did this is twofold. One is to seal it from moisture. It's a wood and cardboard kit. And I realized that it's never going to go underwater, but still there's changes in humidity and, incidental moisture that might cause the cardboard to swell or shift or whatever. So I want to seal it as much as I can to make sure it stays together. The other reason to do it is that the contact cement that I'm using to glue the card sides on works better if it's not a completely porous surface. If it's a porous surface, you have to put a layer on, let it dry, put another layer on, let it dry on both sides, and then stick it together. With the shellac, I hopefully will be able to do just one. I'll just be able to do one coat of glue and slap it on. The other thing about the shellac is that on the can it says it's also a sanding sealer. So I was able to put a coat on, sand some of the areas smoother, like these bolsters here, and the sides and the ends, just to get rid of any rough spots. Again, it's going to be covered by cardboard, but I don't want any little bumps or anything like that sticking through. The next step is going to be to paint the bottom. So got my trusty Ace Premium flat enamel, dries 25 minutes or less. So I'm going to paint the bottom, or take the trucks off, or take the couplers off, paint the bottom, let it dry, and then it'll be time to start putting the sides on. I'll start with the ends, and then probably the sides, and lastly the roof, and finally the details. So I guess I'll get to it. Stop the video for now and go ahead and get to painting. So I have basically the entire car body done. I have the trucks installed, the couplers installed, the underbody's painted black. I've shellacked the whole thing, so it's sealed up pretty well. Got it the correct weight, and now I'm starting to put the embossed card sides on. So I went ahead and did one of the ends already, just to kind of get my technique down. And one of the things I have noticed is that you can see the edge of where I need to cut. So there's a little bit of it sticks out a little bit on the edge, because you want to be able to trim it down so that way you can not have any gaps. You really want this to be flush. And I've already tested it out, and the car is, it's pretty much exactly the right size. So these, at least the first one I did, fit pretty well. It's like a line of rivets that I don't want to cut off. And then the bottom here has this end beam detail on it, but there's a plastic piece that came in the kit of an end beam that I'm going to use instead. So I've cut it all out. This is where it's going to fit. So I need to trim a little bit more off the bottom, which I can do. And that should fit pretty well. And it does. And I screwed up a little bit earlier because when I was putting this one on, I put the contact cement on this side, then I tried to stick the end onto there on the other side, and it didn't stick. So this is what I'm doing. I've already put some of the contact cement on this side. I don't think it'll hurt to put another layer on. I want to make sure I get it all the way to the edges, because that's where it really needed to stick, is at the edges. So I'm just using a piece that I trimmed off to put the contact cement on. This is a piece of the card. All right, so there we go. That's on there. Now I need to put some on the back side of this. And this is a pretty waxy kind of paper. I don't want it on my finger. Pretty waxy kind of paper, so it's not too porous. But I do want to make sure I spread it over the whole thing. I want to get a little bit of it. Make sure I get all the way to the edges. I'm going to let it dry. And that's the way this stuff works best. You don't want it to be gooey. Just magically sticks. Just magically sticks. So there we go. I am going to let that dry. Put the cap on so I don't dry up the glue. Let's see, it dries pretty fast. At least here in my climate it does. So I'm going to line it up. I got a little bit of overhang on the sides, which is what I want. And the top is about perfect. So I'll line it up and I will press it down. So now I've got both sides glued on. There's a little bit of an edge on it on either side here. I'm going to take a X-Acto knife or a razor blade and trim that off. That's what I did on this side. And once I get the sides on, the sides will overlap the end, but there's going to be a little bit of a white edge. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that, but I'm going to look through my paint bin and see if I've got a paint that's close to this color, or maybe a paint pen. If not, I'll have to go to the art supply store or to Walmart or whatever and find an appropriate color of craft paint to stick there. Because I don't want it to look like it's cardboard glued onto a wooden box. So that's how I put one side on. And once that I want to make sure it's completely set up before I move on. So once I get everything done, I'll start putting the sides on. Sides are going to be a little trickier because the detail at the bottom, it's not a straight cut. So I might actually go and buy some new X-Acto blades to make sure I've got the sharpest possible to cut all that out. I went ahead and glued on one of the car sides. So I've got both ends glued on. Got one of the end sills glued on. And I glued on one of the car sides. Wasn't too big of a problem, but cutting out these little notches along the bottom was frankly a pain in the butt. So even with the sharp X-Acto knife or sharp razor blade, it was still very difficult. And you can see there's the white edge of the cardboard kind of exposed. I was also kind of worried that this sticks down a little bit, and you know, this is cardboard and it's still somewhat flimsy where it's not glued down to anything. So I actually went and I took some of the wood glue, just put a little puddle of it on a piece of scrap cardboard, and just used a paintbrush to paint the back side of it. A couple of coats. But prior to doing that, I used, and this is thinner, some flat clear lacquer to kind of soak into the cardboard, and then I put this stuff on to kind of firm it up some. So the next thing I'm going to try to do is use some black paint, because I don't want this to show, of course. So what I'm going to do now is just paint the back of this black. There's some of this flat black craft paint. Kind of hide it up a little bit. So I'm doing kind of one side at a time. That way if I kind of screw something up, I can figure out how to do it better. I guess for the other side, I don't want any of this cardboard to show. The edges already looks a lot better. Oh, this is pretty, it's a pretty big challenge compared to other types of kits. But I am remembering back when I was in graduate school and had no money and very little hobby tools with me at the time, I actually built an HON3 boxcar out of a frozen pizza box, some illustration board, some white glue, and some cheap craft paint, and some bits of brass wire or strip wood that I probably got at Michael's. So for a couple of bucks, I had what I thought was a pretty good looking boxcar. Still have it, but since I made it, it's warped a little bit. So it's not a car that I use too much, but the experience was, building it was quite rewarding. To move to a new place and not have all my stuff with me and not even have a TV, and you know, wanting something to do, just figuring out a way to kind of continue the hobby with very limited resources. And a lot of people shy away from the model railroad hobby, thinking it's very expensive. And my experience is it's about as expensive as you make it to be. you can have a lot of fun scratch building stuff out of things that you get out of the recycling bin. Some cheap spray paint. Oops, got a little on there. I don't know. Oh, no, I got a lot more on there. But should be able to rub that off. So some cheap spray paint, cardboard tubes. You know, you can, nobody forces you to do DCC. And you can go to a train show and pick up a used engine pretty cheap. And an old Tyco rolling stock. You can go ahead and put your KD couplers on it. And get a truck tuner, put on some metal wheels. A little bit of weathering, it'll roll just as well as anything else on your roster. And won't look that bad either. So there we go. Went ahead and painted that side. I'm happy with the way it came out. I got a few challenges ahead of me. One of which, well, first of all, I got to cut the other side and glue it on. And that was a big pain in the butt. But because I'm happy with the way this came out, I feel a little bit more optimistic than I did a little while ago. So one of the things is hiding these corners. They didn't line up exactly right. So I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do there yet. My guess is I'm going to try and stick some like blue painter's tape along each side. And just barely just over the gap and try and fill that with something. Maybe even if it's just glue. Just to even it out and then paint it up to the edge. The other problem I have, now I don't know if it's somebody previously started to put together this kit, but they cut the roof. The roof is cut a little bit short. So I don't quite know what I'm going to do about this. My thought is that I glue it on centered, and then find a little, either a piece of thin strip wood or cut a little thin piece of cardboard to kind of glue over the edge to make a little overhang. So maybe, you know, one of the pieces of scrap. Inevitably, I'm going to have to get a paint color that sort of matches this roof anyway, because I think, well, for one, there's little ice hatches that got to get glued onto the top, but I want them to be painted the same color. And I think there's these little brass ribs that came with it that I think are supposed to glue down over these. There's a little rivet detail at the edge and then kind of fold over the side. So right now this is looking a bit like it's going to be one of the most challenging parts. Looks like it's a little bit discolored. Anyway, I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to figure out how to get that gap at the end. But the next step is just to do the other side here, put the other end sill on. And then I'll worry a little bit about the roof. And then there's some details and stuff that need to be glued on. So I will probably take a piece of this color, maybe just take this whole thing into the craft store and see if I can find a color paint that's very close to it. It doesn't have to match perfectly. If I'm just, you know, kind of touching it up and then put a little weathering on this when it's all said and done. I think an airbrush weathering is probably the route to go for this. Other than that, I think the side, you know, glued on pretty nice, the ends. So I'm excited where this is going. It's going to look like a paper car, but I'm going to try and make it look as realistic as possible, but using the materials as much as I can that came with the kit.